Hey, everybody, this is Brian. I'm the director of the Connecticut Writing Project at Fairfield University, and I'd like to welcome everyone to a special production of the National Writing Project, It's the Right Time, a series to bring National Writing Project teachers together with young adults and children's authors. I'm excited to co-host today again with my colleague and friend, Tanya. Hi, Tanya. How's
Hi,
things going in
Brian.
California? Good?
Sunny.
Awesome. We're going to begin each show in the National Writing Project tradition. That is with a writing prompt that we hope will lead to your own writing project. We know these shows will be viewed by teachers everywhere, but also want them to be an inspiration to parents and young people as well who are learning from home at this time. We invite all listeners to give it a go and to use these writing invitations to spur writing after each episode too.
Thanks, Brian. It's been such a pleasure to work with you and Kristen Schultz from Random House Children's Book and Penguin Random House to launch this series. I am Tanya Baker. I'm the Director of National Programs at the National Writing Project, and I have the pleasure of welcoming all our listeners and guests, and of course, our special author guest today, Matt de la Peña. I'm going to read some things because I don't want to miss anything. Matt de la Peña, there's so much to say about him. Matt de la Peña is a #1 New York Times bestselling and Newbery Medal-winning author. He has penned 6 critically acclaimed YA novels, including Mexican WhiteBoy and The Living, which was a Pura Belpré author honor book. Matt's picture book, Love, was a #1 New York Times bestseller, and Last Stop on Market Street was awarded a Newbery Medal. Matt lives in Brooklyn, New York. You can visit him online at mattdelapena.com and follow him on Twitter at mattdelapena.
And whenever I do anything with Matt, I always talk about my mom being a super fan, but I also just want to promote, last year we used Superman with our writing project, Summer Institute, and we did it as the superpower of hope. And it was just a perfect text to use with the young adult writers that we had. Matt, great having you on the show and seeing you once again. It is my pleasure. My pleasure. I get to introduce my friend, Dr. Tracey T. Flores. When Matt agreed to be a part of the show, I instantly called Tracey because she's a writing project fellow and an assistant professor of language and literacy at the University of Texas at Austin. Dr. Flores is a former classroom teacher, working for 8 years alongside culturally and linguistically diverse students, families, and communities in K-8 schools throughout Glendale and Phoenix, Arizona. Her research focuses on Latina mothers and daughters, language and literacy practices, the teaching of young writers in culturally and linguistically diverse classrooms, and family and community literacies. Tracey is also the founder of Somos Escritores, We Are Writers. Their websites should be up on the screen. It's a creative space for Latino girls grades 6 through 8 to share and perform stories from lived experiences using art, theater, and writing as a tool for reflection, examination, and critique of their worlds. Welcome to the show, Trace.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Tanya. Thanks for having me. And Matt, I'm so excited to be here with you this morning. It's been the highlight of my week.
Well, me too.
All of us, I think. I'm handing the mic directly to you, Tracey, and you can go ahead and get us started when you're ready. Thanks, both of you.
Thank you. Matt, I am so happy to be here with you this morning. And before we start, I just wanted to check in just to see how you're doing before we start writing. How are you doing?
You know what? This is a challenging time. I think many people are in the position that me and my wife are in, which is we're both trying to get work done, and we have 2 children under 6. And, you know, we want to support my daughter's education, who's in kindergarten, but still get work done. So it's a big challenge. We just feel so fortunate that we still have work, you know? How about you?
No, I feel the same way. I have a 4-year-old Milagros who's very close in age to Luna, and trying to make this time as normal as it can be for her.
Yeah.
Not trying to shield her from things, but also not trying to, just trying to be around her and love her and support her. And I'm here at my mom's house right now, and
that's amazing.
A real blessing for me, and that's not lost on me at all.
Yeah.
I just, and like you, I'm happy to still have work. And
do you have, one quick question, do you feel a heightened sense of anxiety during this time, just in general?
Yeah. I cry from time to time because I worry. I have so much concern because of how the situation hasn't been handled.
Yeah.
Many people who are hurting, really, really hurting. and I feel kind of like I want to do more.
Yeah.
And I worry about my daughter too a lot.
Yeah, definitely.
My parents. So yes.
Yeah, I feel the same way.
So I was grateful for this invitation to be in community with the National Writing Project, my lifeline as a teacher, and to be able to talk with you, someone that I know is really doing some amazing things always, but even right now, and we'll talk about that in a little bit.
Sure.
But I wanted to talk about love. Love and your book Love, and this is the invitation that I want to share. And so as you were asking, like, how am I feeling? Like, I've been really turning to books. I've been turning to the stories that my parents shared with me as a child. They're continuing to tell them to me now as my daughter's alongside me. And just the lessons in these remedios, this healing, this medicine, and these stories that they've carried with them, and that remind us of the strength of our families and the importance of love. And so I have also turned to books, lots of books. And I found myself like losing myself in books. And one that I returned to was Love. And in Love, I've read it with the girls in Somos Escritoras. I've read it with parents that I work alongside in schools, and my graduate students and my pre-service teachers. And we talk about love and what it means to be a teacher that's rooted in love and loving communities. And so I really want to start our time together writing about love. So in this moment, like, there's so much uncertainty, there's anxiety, people are suffering, but there's also a lot of love in our world. In this moment, where do you see acts of love in your world, in our world? How are people showing love to one another? How are they showing up through love? Where do you see and feel love in your life? And how can we draw on love to build a new future for all comunidades? And you don't have to write to all of this. As I was in my classroom, I would open this up to whatever you feel like writing into. And I also invite you to draw, to sketch, however feels right for you to enter this time thinking about love. And so I'm going to set the timer. I have my phone right here. And I just invite you to take some time, Matt, Tanya, Brian, and all of you at home who are watching, to think about love. Where are you seeing love in this moment? So that's our time. Of course, you can come back to this. So dot it to come back to it later. And we'll revisit this at the end of our time together. But I wanted to ask Matt, can you share a little bit about what you wrote about?
Yeah. What I love about this is I was always resistant to generative exercises when I was in graduate school for creative writing, but now I love them. And a couple things that came up for me. Our little lemon tree, when we get a new lemon and it has 0 green on it, I get so excited. And making lemonade with my little boy who just turned 2. My daughter climbing into our bed every morning and just wanting to be with us. Our collective anxiety is love to me because we really value our lives and our communities. Turning off the TV, turning off the phone, and walking through the neighborhood and looking at everybody's houses and their yards and like talking about what they're doing and presenting. And then last, to me, this is always the number one, the ocean. Like, when I look at the ocean, it has 0 anxiety. It's still coming toward the shore and receding at the same pace because it's seen it all before. And it kind of like puts everything into perspective that this is so temporary and this is just our perception of what's important. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. Absolutely. And just that it's always there, and it's always
there.
And it's like you said, it's seen it. This is temporary.
Yep.
We can get through this. We will get through this. I drew some stuff.
Oh, cool.
Well, and that's supposed to be a doctor. That's a mask. But one thing that I was thinking about is the way that people are celebrating, like graduations and proms.
Yeah.
Canceled. But it doesn't mean, like I've seen on Twitter, like life hasn't been canceled. And so people are showing up in really creative ways. Another way that I'm seeing love is at my house, I see my parents praying a lot with my daughter and teaching her prayers, and to think that there's something bigger out there watching over us.
Absolutely.
The creativity that I'm seeing, like this right here, is love. All of us coming together as a network, as a community, thinking about a better tomorrow. And so this has been love. And I also want to shout out love to Palabras bilingual bookstore here in Arizona. Chawa Magana is amazing, and she has kept her store open to collect resources for those who are in need. And she has always been a hub of our community, and she continues to work tirelessly so that people know love and that they can survive. And so I needed to shout her out and shout that love out.
Yeah.
Yeah, so many people coming together, drawing on their talents, drawing on their love to help one another.
You know, the creativity element and seeing things like this emerge, it reminds me, there's this great line, sometimes the rhyme is smarter than the poet. In other words, like when you have to find that rhyme, it leads you in a direction you never otherwise would have found. And I feel like this time is making creators think in new ways, and new stuff is coming out.
Yes. And the teaching that I'm seeing happening, and the way that we're putting our expertise online in the service of our community so that we can learn and be connected. No, absolutely. I completely agree. And I wanted to now move into the talk and more about love, because I think that we need love. We need lots of love. And so your book, Love, I was reading up some of your interviews and thinking about this story that's very beautiful, very timely. And it wasn't written very long ago, 2018, but yet it does seem so long ago, especially right now. March seems so long ago, February, but and when your intention, you said, was to write a comforting poem to young people about love. But the first time you wrote it, you didn't think it sounded true. It wasn't authentic. So you went back and you revised it so that it could speak truth about the messiness of love, and how love is the good and bad of love, and how love shows up, where it shows up, and in who it shows up in unexpected ways and unexpected places. Can you talk a little bit about that revision process?
Yeah, sure. So this will hit home for you with a 4-year-old. I think my daughter was only 2 at the time, or maybe she was 3, but I was having a tough time listening to the political discourse and how much dissent there was and polarization, and it was getting so ugly. And I was trying to square being a creator, but also being a parent, and having to go from all that ugliness and that mudslinging to then going into my daughter's room and talking about, hey, this life is beautiful. So how do you do that? So I thought, oh, well, maybe I'll write a poem to her and to every child about love. And so I tried to just make it the antithesis of what I was seeing on TV with the political discourse. So I thought, okay, it's going to be purely reinforcing. But then as I read through it, I thought, God, there's something that seems fake about this. I have to acknowledge the role of adversity in love. You know what I mean? So, you know, we've all experienced where sometimes a friendship, a relationship grows right after a very difficult time, right? So siblings going through a divorce together come closer together. As a parent, my daughter just had a tough time with a Zoom session because she was becoming overwhelmed with what was going on. And she was really overwhelmed by the whole world right now, the coronavirus. And she had a meltdown, and we just sat together, and I just listened to her. And we got so much closer in that moment of adversity. So if I'm going to be truthful about love, I have to at least acknowledge the role of adversity. So that's how it changed for me. And I remember when I was writing it, I thought, oh, this idea of stars that shine long after they've flamed out, because we can't see that they flamed out for so long, right? And that became the transition into what I consider the most troublesome image in the book, which is the boy under the piano. Yeah. And so I came into that through stars and came out of that with a parent holding the child. So to me, it was important to like wrap that adversity in love.
No, absolutely. And being true. And like I mentioned earlier, like there's going to be bad stuff that happens, and not shielding. Like there's sometimes you can't, and it's going to make our daughters are stronger, our children stronger, and have us grow closer
Yeah.
through this love. And the way you start that book with the parents at the beginning looking in, and then at the end, when you're going to go off into the world, you're not going to need luck.
Yeah.
Love. When I read that, I have to stop, because it just reminds me of the deep love that is present in my life and the deep hope that we have for all of our kids, and the love,
Absolutely.
regardless of the complexity of our lives. We love our kids.
Yeah, absolutely. Can I actually show you that image? Because Lauren gave me the painting, and it's my favorite thing in my house, so I'll grab it real quick.
Yes, we would love
So this image, it's my favorite in the book, and I feel so lucky that I have it. But if you, let's see if I can get it without the glare. If you see it right there, the life begins with the parents just staring in at the baby.
Mm-hmm.
And you're the center of the universe. You know,
Yeah.
that's your perception.
Mm-hmm.
But the book has to end with you no longer the center of the universe. You're a part of it. So what is important to me about this picture is that there are so many other stories around the one that we're focused on in the book. So if you look at all the other figures, they have their own stories, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And like, I think to me, that's one of the most important parts of understanding the concept of love, is that you're a part of it. You're not the centerpiece of it, you know?
Mm-hmm. And we all experience it in different ways.
Exactly.
It shows up in interesting ways throughout our life. And sometimes we
Yeah.
don't realize it's love. And like the burnt piece of toast, I love that part, and love
Totally.
to work at early in the morning on the bus. All of that really resonates with what love, how it looks and how it manifests.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. I love it. And everyone
Absolutely.
that I'm with loves it. And it's
Oh, that's cool.
I've turned back to, and recently I've felt it differently. So thank you for that.
It does change. Like, I think it's interesting. You said you're turning to books. Have you noticed how the books that we saw one way when we first read it, like 6 years ago, 8 years ago, even a year ago, it's different now. So like, I love that books have the possibility of change depending on when you're reading them, you know?
I agree. And like, this is 2 years old. It's written 2 years ago.
I know.
And it seems like decades ago. If you were to revise it again, what would that look like?
Okay, this is good. I think I'm going to lean on this idea. I once heard Percival Everett, who's an African-American author of adult novels, and he answered the question so well. He was standing in front of a group. He has, I don't know, at the time he had like 32 novels. And somebody asked a question that many people ask. Hey, if you could go back and take your first book and revise it, what would you do different?
Mm-hmm.
And he thought about it for a second. Then he goes, you know, I could go back in and make it a better novel. He goes, I have all these new tools that I've sort of developed over the years because I've written so many now. I could make it a better novel, but I don't think I could make it a better piece of art. Mm. And I love that idea, because the way I would answer your question is, I think it's best to just abandon the work, let it exist for what it is. And if it gets picked up in a conversation in ways that make you feel good as the writer, that's great. But if it gets picked up in a conversation that makes you feel bad as an author, that's also important. That's equally valid, right? Mm-hmm. So we hear all this talk about own voices right now and the power of the own voice story. And if you wrote a book that's outside of that and you're getting criticism, I think you have to be humble and just say, well, this is part of the conversation happening today. So I guess the way I would answer your question is, I just want it to be whatever it is in any conversation. And I'm going to be humble enough to just let it exist the way it is. And I'm going to work on the next things. And maybe the things that I might revise about a work, I'll think about in my next work. If that makes sense?
No, that makes complete sense. And that's where we grow as writers. That's where we
exactly
grow as, and thinking about how we are going to take what we learned from writing this into our next pieces.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And so I wanted to also talk about connections and this connection through writing. And earlier we talked about how people are showing up in creative ways.
Yeah.
Taking their talents and their expertise and their passions and broadcasting it. And you are one of those people. You have your Dear Stuck at Home student letters that you've been writing. And I realized the first one was on March 17th. And I remember that day vividly because I was driving back from a turnaround trip from Texas to Arizona to be here. And I've been here since March 17th. And I was seeing people opening up their lives, running writing workshops online, showing how they draw, opening up themselves, showing their real authentic selves.
Yeah.
And in these conversations, also letting us know it was okay to feel all of these feelings, that it was healthy, that you might be scared and that's okay. You might be feeling angry and that's okay. Like this is healthy. And, I saw artists, music, everyone, and your letters, to students, to dads, to writers, which by the way, really moved me. That right there, the way that you use the writing to connect, the way that you used your craft to connect. Can you share about that experience and what made you decide to start these letters?
Well, the first one came because I was thinking about my daughter who's in kindergarten and she loves her little school. But how do you translate that to Zoom? And I was seeing the frustration and I was thinking, well, I would love to write a letter to a bunch of Lunas out there, who are trying to figure out what does it mean to be in school staring at a computer. So that was the first one. And then I just was moved to write to other audiences like dads and writers and teachers. And I think what you realize is that so many people are doing what they would do even if they didn't get paid for it. You know what I mean? So nobody's doing, I guess there are some people who are a little there's some career thoughtful, directional thinking going on. But I think for the most part, people are just like, I'm moved. I want to share what I'm feeling in some way. Yes, I'm an adult novelist or I'm a musician, but this is just what I do. Yeah. I'm lucky enough to get paid for it. But in the meantime, this has happened. I'm feeling this way. And this is how I express myself. And I want to share it with you. So I think that's what the letters have become it's just me doing what I would do. Normally, as you know, Tracey, because I've been at events with you, I travel all over. And now I'm not traveling. So I have more time to do stuff like that. So it's my way of traveling without traveling.
Are you surprised at the responses you've received?
Oh yeah, it's cool. My favorite responses are kids.
Yes.
I will tell you, I got the Dear Writer one. I got some intense responses. I think, one of them that stands out is, oh gosh, I want to make sure I get this right. I think it was a woman in Peru, and she wrote this long, beautiful letter about how she feels. She's an educator in Peru, and how she always had wanted to be a writer. And now she just thinks what I'll be doing is responding to things like this. That's going to be the way I exercise my desire to be a writer. And it was so beautiful. I was like, this should be published, what she had written. So yeah, I'm super moved by so many of the responses. And I feel lucky that I get to read them.
And you've opened up this place for people who might not have seen this writing as this way to heal or to
definitely
in a very authentic way in this moment as they're processing their lives, as they're processing what's tomorrow, what am I, what does this mean for my job, my health, my children, my parents.
So true. And I think the letter is an interesting form. I've always been obsessed with letters ever since The Color Purple. You know what I mean? Like, I love epistolary novels because of The Color Purple. And wow, the letter form is so powerful.
And getting a handwritten letter.
Oh my gosh, getting a handwritten letter. There's nothing better.
I used to do pen pals when I was younger. And so when I get handwritten letters, I keep them, and
Yeah,
it takes time to write them, but I still send, handwritten notes because there's something beautiful and important about that kind of connection too,
I totally agree.
writing. Um, I wanted to move on to talk a little bit too about this belief that I see in your writing, this theme that I see in your writing and your storytelling. And one thing that stands out is that this idea, this belief that I feel that our stories can change,
Hmm.
that our stories can change. And I believe this too. And in your books, I've seen this. And I think specifically about We Were Here.
Oh yeah.
And I think about Miguel, Rondell, and Mong. And I love that book so much. And I love how you showed these characters and all their complexity, not as damaged, but as complex individual, because no one is damaged. There are structures around us
Yeah.
that to change, and it's not us, it's these systems. And I knew these kids. I taught these kids.
Yeah.
They weren't bad kids. They lived complex lives. They had experiences, things I had never experienced or can never fathom how I would come out of some of the things that they've gone through. But I never thought they were bad. I believe that they deserve to be loved, that they deserve second chances, that they shouldn't be defined by things, their situations, and that they deserved opportunity. And as that book progresses, we see the way that they're changing their lives. And he's writing in the book. He's in the book. Miguel's writing, and then I remember when he finds the files and he rips them up because of the things it says about Rondell and Mong, because that's not what he believes, and these ugly things. And so I think about how we can rewrite our stories, but also how when they're written, they can also harm depending on who's telling these stories. But in that story, I see how these stories are changing. And then in your interviews and your speeches, I also hear you've shared about the young people that you've had interactions with, and about the young man Joshua who shared his writing with you, and you read it, and then the next day he was gone. But his story can still change. And then you shared your own story alongside your father's story, and how you found books in college and how they were a place for you to feel. And then through your finding books, your father found books.
Yeah.
His story changed, and he went on to get a BA in literature, and then he is now a third grade teacher.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about this, about rewriting our stories and about how our stories can change. And I just, I wanted to talk a little bit more about that. How do you write these narratives in a way that it's not always a happy ending, but there's this hope?
Yeah. So, you make me think of something I read. I think this was, so it's either Philip Roth or Milan Kundera. They both wrote books about the art of the novel. And I think whichever one of them wrote this, I've always been obsessed with this idea that, okay, we're born in a country that we don't choose.
Mm-hmm.
We're born into a community we don't choose. We're born in with parents that we don't select, and an ideology that we don't pick. So all of this stuff is assigned to us depending on where we're born. And I feel like we have two births. We have that initial birth when we come into the world. And then we have the intellectual birth where we actually start to wake up and see the world, right?
Yes.
And so, yeah. And so I think every novel is really about that second birth. It's like, okay, now you understand all the stuff that you've been brought up inside, like all the walls. And now you have to figure out what to do about it. And that to me is what a novel is. It's a character trying to figure out, what are you going to do about it? And so if you look at Miguel from We Were Here, he sees the files and he sees the way how the system has defined him and Rondell and Mom. And he decides, no, I'm ripping that up. You don't get to tell me who I am.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to write who I am. And I feel like that's such a powerful thing for everybody. It doesn't matter if you come from poverty or if you come from extreme wealth and people think they've written your story, who you are. But no, you can rip that up too and be who you want to be. So that's where I think I start every book from. And then this idea of, I don't love happy endings. They don't feel quite right to me, but I do love hopeful endings because there's a possibility. And I don't know if there's anything more beautiful than possibility, of something good happening, or you getting that pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Like, I think the possibility is the power, not the actual accomplishment.
Yeah. And the way that writing can be that for us. And you touched on, when I was like, yes, when you were talking about we're reading the world and becoming conscious, and get it. Our young people get it. They are, you said it in an interview about being non-readers, but they are not non-readers. They are reading the world.
Oh, totally.
And that's important.
Oh
and
my gosh. If you look at if you look at a kid who comes from a tough background, and that kid has a tough home life, and maybe doesn't have has parents that are not there all the time because they have to work or whatever it is, and they sometimes are so much smarter than the kid who has all the support. They're just smart in a different way, And I remember growing up, and I wasn't a reader, but I felt like I was reading everything. I understood what was happening. Going back to my dad, I think, has always been an artist who had no art. Does that make sense? He looked at life like an artist would. How could I take this and interpret it? But he didn't have a place to put it, possibly because of the way he grew up. And now here I am. I had family support. I had a mom who gave us, me and my two sisters, extreme belief in ourselves. So I had more of an opportunity to find my art. And I feel lucky that I did,
And speaking of your father, are you going to write that story?
I want to. I would love to do that. I think he has to be a big part of it. So I got to get him on board. This guy's dragging his feet.
That guy or you guy?
He's supposed to be writing notes. Maybe you could tell him a special message to get on that, because he's supposed to be writing me notes. They come in every 5 months. It's like, what are you doing here?
We need these stories. We need the stories of our elders, of our parents. They're gifts. And
they are.
And that intergenerational sharing, and that brought you together, these books, it just shows the power of writing, the power of story, and how they can bring people together in really unexpected ways.
I totally agree. And it's interesting too, because for me and my dad, it was books. But for some father and son relationship, and I'll just speak to the male one because that's what I know, it might be working on a house. You know what I mean? So there are all these different ways to communicate and be together and share. But there is something powerful about books. I just shared with my dad a book called The Milkman. And, most people who I recommend this book to, they're like, oh, it's too dense. It's the sentences go on for half a page. I can't get into it. And he just finished, and he loved it. And talking to him about it, it's my favorite thing in the world, And
it's your special connection.
Exactly.
It's the way that you connect. So I'm going to tell him right now, if he's there watching, write your story. It can change so many lives, and it's important, and your voice matters.
And by the way, I'm going to support that and say, you just heard that from a professor at the University of Arizona. So he's good with taking, a
and
professor's.
When it's published, come to UT and we'll have a celebration.
That sounds awesome.
Do an author tour and bring you to
that sounds good.
Right here. So I'm waiting.
Do you know what? He did one speech with me at my old college, my alma mater, and he read this incredibly powerful thing that he wrote, and he just stared at the paper the whole time. He didn't look up at the crowd. He didn't even know that they were really moved by what he was saying. Pretty funny.
He's rocking it. So I can't wait to invite him to UT once this is published, both of you.
Absolutely.
Can't wait. And with that, I wanted to also ask, or just one last thing before we move into the closing writing, is
sure
about representation in your stories. And I just remember when you won your Newbery Award. I remember because I was in the car taking Mila. I wasn't driving, so I was being safe. Taking Mila and to her 4-month appointment, and I saw on Twitter, I was following the awards, and I saw that you won for Last Stop on Market Street, and I told my husband, and he's like, dude, that's your friend. I'm like, I know. And I started crying. And that was such a big moment for so many reasons. I'm sure for you in different ways, but I just really wanted to share that with you because in that moment I cried, because you're for someone I admire and I think of as a friend.
Yeah.
So because seeing a book with CJ and his Nana and their beautiful story being celebrated, and the world in that book being celebrated, and thinking about this new possibilities, and thinking about that my daughter Milagros will finally have a book that will have books that reflect her biculturalism, her bilingualism. Yeah. And then I also cried because finally there's books that I always needed, and I needed it and I wanted and I didn't have.
Yeah.
And so it felt like a win for all of us. And I really wanted to, I'm not trying to put this here, but it really, it felt like we all won. So many wins that day.
Mm.
And so I wanted to thank you for that. And I wanted to just tell you that I appreciate the way that so maybe this isn't a question, but I really appreciate the way that you write your characters and their worlds with all their complexities, but also all their beauty, that you illuminate so many stories and that you're out there doing the good work.
Well, thank you. It just feels so lucky that, that story got touched, by the powers that be and now it's going to be in more hands. I feel the same way I know you and I are both friends with Meg Medina. And when she won, I was so thrilled because I've just watched her career and I feel like she's always been doing great work without trying for awards.
Yes.
And here she was given a Newbery for a book, by the way, that I'm reading to my daughter right now. And it's such a cool experience. I'm like, you've met this woman. She said, Luna. Yeah, exactly. And it's like, she doesn't quite grasp that, Meg Medina. And she's like laughing at some of the lines. And I'm like, her. This is your friend.
Right.
But I hear what you're saying. It feels so cool that story, mercy is anointed by the powers that be as something that we should read. I love that,
And even without the award, we should be reading these books.
100%.
All of our classrooms, because like you and like me, we should not have to wait till college to have access to these stories.
Totally.
Will change our whole perspectives on.
And don't you think our daughters are a generation that's going to have more stories than ever before that they really are going to be able to identify with,
Yes. And I'm so grateful for everyone doing the work, and the teachers and the librarians who are putting these books in kids' hands, and all of you authors and illustrators who are touring and making this work accessible. Because I don't ever remember having authors come to my school, and I would have died to have met Meg Medina or Matt De La Pena,
totally.
A young girl who loved to write, but trying to figure out where my place was amongst Sweet Valley Twins and Babysitters Club.
And you know what, Tracey? It's so amazing that your daughter is going to have this story, let's take Mercy, right?
Mm-hmm.
She's going to have this story. But you know what? It's equally important for the people in power in Arizona to their children to read this story too. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. So I want to now turn to the closing writing. But before we do that too, I just want to thank you, Matt, for this time to come together in community. These connections are so important. And I feel happy to be alongside you in this work, in the work that matters to us, that's important for all children, and that's important for education, because it's going to make a difference. I don't want to go back to the way it was. And I don't want to believe that this is our normal, because it's not.
Yeah.
Towards better, and I'm happy to be in this with you.
Yeah, well, I feel the same. And by the way, speaking of representation, your students are so lucky. You know, you're a figure of somebody who's done the work and is now teaching it, and that's just as powerful. You know.
Thanks, Matt. I appreciate that. Thank you. And so I wanted to turn back to love. I wanted to turn back to our beginning time together. This was. We talked about, where are you seeing love in your life, in the world? What are the acts of love that you're seeing? And then the last prompt was, how can we draw on love to build a new future for all of our communities? And I wanted to sandwich our time together thinking about that. We've been talking love, story, family, community, the power of representation, many stories mattering, also the opportunity to rewrite your stories, and that your story can change. And so how can we draw on love and hope to build a new future for all comunidades? And thinking about these things, but how are we putting this into action in our classrooms, in our schools, and through our own writing? How are we going to do these things? So I'm going to set the timer for a few minutes and invite all of you to write this time out together with us in the tradition of the Writing Project. Okay, go ahead and come to a stopping place. And I want to thank you all for being here. And I want to leave with a call to action. How are we going to document this moment? How are we going to learn from this moment? What are we learning from this moment that we need to write about and share so that we can build new futures? And I also want to say, we are the NWP, and this is what we do. And if you're on here, I call all of you to take your learning from this moment, all the beauty, all the struggle, all the challenges, and put it into action, into something productive.
Tracey, I couldn't agree more. I'm sitting here thinking about all the Matt Della Peña books that align our shelves at home. And I'm thinking about one of the things that I love the most is the way that every character knows their community and teaches everyone else about that community. And I think that's what the Writing Project has always done for me as well, is it's allowed my community to expand to a network of others, right? This Friday, you all definitely made my week. I'm looking forward to these, Tanya. If we do this every Friday, it's like, wow.
I know, right?
The joy of seeing the two of you talking about books and about writing was just outstanding. I'm inspired. I think I know I need these conversations, and I thank you on behalf of the entire network for bringing this voice to us today. It's so necessary. Feeling blessed.
Feeling blessed indeed. Tracey and Matt, that was amazing. Tracey, I was afraid you were not going to ask that last question about representation, and then you did, and then I started crying, and then I was like, now what am I going to do? I have to go back and talk. It's really, I've been blessed to be in the National Writing Project Network for over 20 years now. I meet the most amazing teachers like Tracey, and then she introduces me to the most, and Brian, obviously, and then they introduce me to the most amazing people like you, Matt. So I'm also feeling very blessed and very thankful to you both for being with us. have to close by inviting listeners, if they have enjoyed the shows, I'm sure they have, to say that we're glad that you were with us today, and we really want to see you again. So we hope you'll follow us, the National Writing Project, on Twitter or Instagram. You can join our Facebook community to talk with other teachers like Tracey and Brian, who share their work openly and joyously. Or visit us at nwp.org and sign up for our Right Now newsletter. Thank you, everyone, for this great Friday morning event. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you. Thank you guys for having me.
Thank you for coming. We really appreciate it. It was a wonderful conversation.